Hello and welcome to the Overland Journal podcast. I am your host, Scott Brady, and I am joined today by an absolutely incredible adventurer, someone that has been such an inspiration to me. We have Patty Upton with us. We have wanted to get her on the podcast now for years, and her story that of her travels with her husband, Lauren, are absolutely incredible, including crossing Africa, crossing the length of the Americas, and of course, crossing the Darien Gap. So, Patty, thank you so much for being on the podcast with me today.
Thank you, Scott. I really appreciate it.
And a special thanks to Warner, home of the Ineos Grenadier and the Mercedes-Benz Van Center, Warner. Whether you're traveling through canyon country in your Sprinter or across continents in your Grenadier, Warner has become a trusted stop for serious overlanders. I have personally serviced my quartermaster at Warner and have seen the work they do to their successful Rebel Rally competition Grenadiers. Matt Scott has experienced Warner too, helping his father-in-law buy a Grenadier from the dealership a few months ago. Warner has become known for supporting travelers in both Grenadiers and Sprinters, whether it's outfitting, maintenance, or helping with complex expedition builds. I have seen their team contribute to the community through sponsoring events, Rebel Rally teams, vehicle training, and remote technical support. It also helps that Tony Warner is an overlander himself, so he is committed to fitting high-quality components and helping fellow travelers. As a thank you for the podcast listeners, they are offering $500 off a new or used Ineos or Sprinter, or 10% off parts and service up to $500. Just tell them you heard about it on the Overland Journal podcast. Thanks again, Tony, and the Warner team for your support of this week's podcast.
Oh, you're so welcome. And one of the things that I have so loved watching over the last few years, a loss like losing your husband is such a powerful change in life. And you chose to not make that the end of the story for you either. You were gonna find a way.
Start me off crying.
That's okay.
No, when he passed, we'd always talked about getting out and telling the story of the sand ship Discovery because it was his dream to do this. I ended up just going along as photographer and eventually joining as photographer, and it wasn't years later till we actually got married. So I've always wanted to travel, so it fit right in my wheelhouse. But yeah, when he passed, I thought, we never got out there to do this. I've got to do it, and that's what I've been doing.
You have, and you have gone to so many overland expos. You've been interviewed, you've been featured in some great publications. Yes. You've been featured by Overland Journal and our team, and of course our entire team is so inspired by you. So, for me, there's a couple things that come to mind, but when we were talking yesterday, one of the things that stood out was kind of what started your passion for travel, and that began with, I believe your dad was in the Marines.
Right. Dad was Marine Corps, so you had your bags packed every 3 years saying, okay, let's go. Where are we going now? And I always liked reading books. I was looking at their library out here in the Roadhouse, and I have a lot of them. Some of them are my favorite authors. The Endurance, that one has to be one of the best stories told. Martin and Osa Johnson in Africa. These are people that, Burl Markham, Gertrude Bell, that's missing. I have a copy of Gertrude Bell, I ought to send them. These are all, anything with Lawrence Vanderpost, anything like that, were the stories I read as a kid. When I say a kid, a teenager. So it just fueled my imagination just to find, and maps. I can't stop looking at the map. I love looking at maps. So yeah, it's...
Me too.
It's just something that's in the blood, and I just enjoy it.
Well, and then your story gets more amazing because you were living in the Panama Canal zone.
Correct.
So, that shut down, around 2000 or 1999?
1999 was the last, December 31st, 1999.
Sure, because that was like a 100-year agreement with the U.S. government, something along those lines. And you... You were there when it was still being operated by the U.S. government, and you grew up there and even went to college there. Tell us how that experience was of living internationally.
I don't relate to people that have been in one place for any length of time, and which is hard because I've now lived in one place for 30 years, so that's very difficult. I've always had people that were in and out of my life because of traveling. And when I got to Panama, my dad was, he'd retired from the Marine Corps and he was working for the government and was transferred down to Panama. And it was like we got off the plane. I said, oh, this is eternal summer. I love outdoors. I like being outside. I don't need walls. I don't need any of that sort of stuff. And you just lived outdoors on your patio for 99% of the year.
Mm-hmm.
Christmas dinner was, steaks on the barbecue.
Yeah,
you put your Christmas lights up once and never took them down. So yeah, it was my type of a climate. So I did my last two years of high school there and then 2 years of college. And I met my first husband and stayed down there. He worked for the Panama Canal company at the time. And just loved it. It was just great. It was, eternal summer. It was, cool with 75 degrees.
And a fairly safe country
Oh, yeah.
overall. It still is, very much so.
And that was something that I didn't have a problem with. And some people in the Canal Zone, especially the military communities in the Canal Zone, because I worked with military wives, and they wouldn't venture outside the Canal Zone. It was like there was a stigma to going just across an imaginary line. And you can sleep in the Canal Zone, you can exist in the Canal Zone, but you had to live in Panama.
Yeah, sure.
You wanted to go to a good restaurant, you wanted to go out, you wanted to go four-wheeling, all this was outside in that country.
Yeah, and it's an interesting place. I remember when I drove through Central America, and all of those countries feel similar. They're not the same, but they feel very similar when you go from Honduras into Nicaragua or whatever. It feels or Guatemala into Belize or whatever. They feel very similar. But then when you go into Panama, it is definitely a change, and Panama City even more so. Because it's kind of a financial hub.
It is. It's a big financial hub, but a lot of that dates back many years ago when it was also a money laundering hub. So a lot of those big buildings you see down there were money laundering, and this is back in the Noriega era. But it was always tranquil. It was there were riots and stuff. I can remember saying, I know my ex-husband had to go downtown to get a car parked. I forget what it was. We lived relatively close to what would be the imaginary border with Panama and the Canal Zone. And he was leaving. I said, stay out of the riot areas. You'll stay safe. It was one of those things that you just lived with.
Yeah, it became something
you became comfortable with. You knew that the police were going to carry automatic weapons, and it was just all a part of life down there.
But what an incredible place for those formative years for you as a young person, and then a young adult, and then, getting married and having your life develop in a very unique place.
Oh, I loved it. Yeah.
So, your story, it touches me a lot because my mom was the daughter of a Marine, and she loved to travel. It was in her blood too, because her dad traveled around the world, and she, was part of her childhood was in Guam and all these incredible things, So it's interesting seeing the parallels about how a childhood spent as a child of someone that's in the military. It often inspires future travels. Yeah.
And something I got to bring in this too with my mom, because my dad was my inspiration for travel, but my mother, I always said she was more like, less like June Cleaver. And for those of you that are old enough to know who June Cleaver is, you'll have to look at an old TV program from the 60s or 50s, wearing the pearls and the dress and vacuuming. My mother was not June Cleaver. She was more like MacGyver.
I like that.
And so I took after that too. My sister does the cooking. I don't need that. I figure out how something works, make it work, change how it works, that sort of thing, and be outside, do things.
But how incredible though that, that many years later, when you have the opportunity to meet Lauren and then become a part of the expedition, that you're back in Panama and you're back into crossing the Darien Gap.
When I first met Lauren in '75, when he came down on his first expedition, my ex-husband brought him home. My husband and I were still married, and he brought home this guy that was driving this big Ford 250 pickup truck, specially outfitted. That, as soon as you saw that in the Darien, in the Canal Zone, you thought, oh my God, this guy thinks he's driving to South America. What is he? He's clueless. And my husband and I had worked for the Boy Scouts, the Girl Scouts, and ties with the military, people that worked for the military. So my ex-husband brought him home, said, this guy thinks he's driving to South America. So we had hooked him up with contacts. And he was looking for volunteers to go with him. Well, I was at the right age, but my brain wasn't in the right place. I was recently married, and I thought I'm working on a career. I've got a home I'm trying to start, blah, blah, blah. So it was helping him out the way I could. And that trip, of course, was sadly interrupted and ended because a man was shot and killed on that trip.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about that if you can. I mean, I think those are stories that oftentimes don't make it to the pages of a book or to the pages of a magazine. So what occurred, and how did Lauren deal with that? What were the consequences of having that happen?
It was one of the great sadnesses in his life to have someone shot and killed that was with him. He had met Larry in the Canal Zone. Larry was about 4 or 5 years older than Lauren. Lauren was 40 at the time. Larry was a former military Army medic. He had a prosthetic foot from the ankle down. And Lauren was looking for volunteers to go with him through the Darien Gap to help with searching trail, cutting trail, that sort of thing.
Bridge building, everything else. Yeah.
And Larry said, well, I can't really do any of that. I'd love to go. He says, well, look, you can be cook and you can be medic, and you won't have to really leave the vehicle. Just take care of the campsite, basically. So Larry said, sure. And he and Larry got along really good because they were closer in age than some of these younger kids that were, 17 years old and hitchhiking through and that sort of thing. And as a result, most of these guys, once it became hard work, they all quit. Larry's the only one that stayed with Lauren. And they were 7 miles off, when I say an established road, it was a road, I think it was DevCon, was a construction company out of Florida. They were putting the road through to Yavisa, and they punched a hole through the jungle, so it had all been felled and cleaned and cleared and bedded and gravelled. That was it. And then it was jungle after that. So there were 7 miles off of that road into the jungle. And he broke an entire rear axle housing, not just the axles. And it was the second time. The first time he thought Mr. Ford had built a bad vehicle. Well, when it broke the second time, he realized that maybe he had overloaded Mr. Ford's vehicle. And that's what caused it. And DevCon used the same vehicles. They said, look, we can get the part for you and ship it in and get you on your way. So Lauren had to hike out the 7 miles to the road, get a ride to the construction camp. So it was nothing, as you know, nothing works quickly. You're well, hell and gone from anywhere most of the time. So he was back and forth between camp and the construction company. He'd come back to camp, he'd check in with Larry. Local natives would be there. They'd bring Larry water, they'd bring Larry fruit and vegetables. Lauren would go out on clear trail towards Yavisa. And this went on for several weeks while he was waiting for parts to come in. So he was in and out of camp quite regularly. Gone for several days, then back for several days. Gone for several days, then back. Finally, it was getting time for the axle housing to arrive. So he left for the construction camp. And while he was there, a guardia came up to him and said, the man that was with you was shot and killed.
Oh, wow.
And Lauren couldn't believe it because he'd heard rumors of it. He says, no, the man I heard that was killed was closer to Yavisa. And he says, no, it was the man that was with your vehicle, and they described the vehicle. And so from that point on, and for some unknown reason, they basically arrested Lauren. The whole construction camp knew he'd been there for 3 or 4 days. There was no way. And there was a company journal that everyone would write in. And Lauren would always write in before he left camp, going to construction camp. So they'd and the guardia already had all this information. They had found the body of Larry laying out on the ground outside the passenger side of the vehicle with a small caliber bullet hole behind his right ear. He had his Bible and his pipe makings and everything, and was on the ground. And we've seen enough of how the natives handle their weapons down there. They're not overly cautious. And our assumption is that the group natives had come to camp, had spent the day with Larry and said, bye, we'll see you tomorrow or whatever, threw their rifles over their shoulders and left camp, and one discharged. That's our assumption. We don't know. Because no native is going to stand up and say, I'm sorry, but, it was an accident. And because everything when the Guardia found it, the truck was unlocked, everything, and they locked what they could up in the vehicle. What they couldn't lock up, they inventoried and took to Yavisa, to their headquarters. Now, some of that stuff that was on that inventory, Lauren never got back. So it was anything that went missing somewhere besides a theft out there. So whatever happened, there was no theft at the vehicle.
Yeah, sure.
So that put an end to that trip. It just was a very, very sad thing and very difficult for Lauren to deal with. The only saving grace, he says, is the fact that Larry was an older man.
Yeah.
He wasn't a 17-year-old kid that Lauren talked into this romantic high adventure.
Right.
You know, Larry had been around the world. He'd traveled extensively. He'd been in the military, so he knew a little bit of
and he was doing exactly what he wanted to be doing at that moment.
Exactly.
Yeah, for sure.
So that was the only saving grace, that it wasn't just some 17-year-old kid he talked into it for a romantic high adventure, and it was just a very hard thing for him to swallow.
And as I remember from researching for this talk, Lauren had tried multiple times before your almost 3-year journey through the Gap that was successful.
Yeah, the Ford was the first one, and then there were two more after that, one in 79, one in 77, and one in 79. Both of those were failures. For one reason or another. And I hadn't heard from him 77. When he came down in 77, I saw him, and that's the last I saw or heard from him until I saw him in 84.
Wow. And he was back down in Panama at that time.
Yeah, someone said, hey, that guy that's trying to go through the Darien Gap is back. So I looked him up.
Yeah.
And again, tried to help him, because my husband and I were separated by that time. And I thought, well, maybe I'm ready to do something like this.
Sure.
And he needed a photographer. And I said, well, I can arrange to get off work for 30 days and pay the bookkeeper to be there full time, and then I don't have to be there full time. And he says, okay. So I ended up, and I had to make sure, because I knew Lauren's philosophy, I couldn't say I want to go.
Yeah.
Unless my butt was in that seat when we pulled out. It was one of those things that I had to make sure everything was taken care of ahead of time, so that when I told him I wanted to go, that I was going to be there.
You were going to be able to make it happen. And at that time, was the road through to Yavisa yet?
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
You could get to it was 179 miles from Panama to Yavisa, and that took us, I think, the better part of 10 hours to drive. It was not anywhere near as good as it is now, but it's So there was still Bailey bridges over some of the creeks, and I think there was one or two creeks that didn't have a bridge. There were.
That was as far south as I could go. They wouldn't let me go any further. The Comandante's like, no, you can't go any further. So.
And now they have a big sign up, and all these places. The one at Ushuaia has a big sign, and we didn't see any of that. One at the equator, none of that. It's all.
Absolutely. So let's talk through that almost 3 years. 2 years and 11 months or something like that?
741 days.
Incredible. So did that involve you guys leaving the vehicle for periods of time and coming back out, or repairs? What resulted in it taking almost 3 years?
First, because we wanted to do it entirely on land, and finding a land route was the goal to do. And because you go down there and you ask a native, how do I get from Boca de Cupe to Pucarú? They'll say you get on the river, and you go down this river, and then you go up the Pucarú River, and whatever. No, that's not what we want to do. We need a land route. So then we would hire natives to search. And Lauren learned from his first trip that volunteers are not the way to go. Hiring the natives, they know the place. They may not know a land route because they don't venture that far back other than where they're farming or hunting. They're not going to villages other than by river. But they can read the land, and they can read the environment much better than we can. I always say that we were lost the entire time if it wasn't for our natives that we had hired for us, because we had no clue where we were going.
Sure.
And Lauren was very fortunate to have some good men working for him. And so finding that land route was all important. We got to the village of Pucarú in late March. We had done 37 miles in 30 days. And not late March, it would have been early March. And this would have been 85. And it was newly created in 79, national park in Colombia called Los Catios National Park. And that had posed a problem for Lauren's previous trip. and
Getting permitting and that kind of thing.
yeah, permit was piece of cake. It was the corrupt park official that he had to deal with after he
gotcha.
got the permit that didn't go over well. And that vehicle's actually abandoned in the jungle and left there. So he
What
was
vehicle was that?
brand new 79 CJ5.
Wow.
He was still making payments on the previous one that he had also had trouble with. Not because of the Darien, but further on. Anyway, we ended up, he had to find a route around this national park because we had tried to get permission, writing letters and that before we left Panama, and we weren't getting anywhere with Los Catios. So Lauren said, okay, what we'll do is we'll work around the park. We'll see it, because there's no bound, we don't know where the boundary is. We're just going to do our best to see if we can get. So we went on a new route, but first off, rains were coming. Rainy season, you don't go through this area.
Sure.
I mean, it's hard enough, and people don't realize that even though it's quote unquote dry season, you do have a lot of moisture down there on the ground. You've got fallen leaves and debris from the trees, and you don't have all sorts of roots that are exposed. Nothing is smooth. So it's a rough going even when it's dry season. But
Sure.
at least the rivers are usually more manageable during dry season.
Passable, sure.
So the rainy season was coming. So we got to the Pucarú, which is a Kuna village in Panama. And he decided, okay, and he asked permission if he could camp near the village until the next dry season. And they showed him a place that he could camp near the river, close to the village, but not in the village. And that's where he stayed for 9 months.
Incredible.
Living out of the Jeep. And
Incredible.
I went back to my job, and then there was missionaries that had been in Pucarú, but weren't during this time. They were on sabbatical. But the pilot would still fly down to the village land on this little grass strip and take supplies down to the villagers. So I arranged with the pilot to take supplies down to Lauren, and I put up a care package for the villagers as well. So he
Sure.
would take stuff down to the villagers. And that was for 9 months. And then during that time, Lauren did attempt to try and find a way around the park. Not successful. Well, he wasn't sure if it was successful or not, because we don't know. There's nothing out there that says,
Yeah.
you're now entering the national park.
Sure.
All we know is when we crossed the border in that next dry season, so it'd be dry season 1987, most people went this direction. We went basically south. We took a hard right and basically turned south at that point. We could have crossed back into Panama. We don't know, because
sure.
we were trying a whole new route that had never been done, but we got into some pretty rugged mountains as a result. And that particular dry season, we ended with 2 axles broken. We'd broken both rear axles, and we knew if we had been in the park, we knew we were out of the park because we were beginning to see little tiny farms. And that's where we broke down near this. We were winching the last day or two, and there was this little tiny farmhouse, smaller than this room, corrugated metal roof and plank sides. And we contracted with the farmer for 50 cents a day to watch the Jeep, and we said, we don't know when we'll be back. And he built a little wooden corral around it, and we had a big blue rain tarp that we put up. And that's where and we took out the whole rear end. Lauren said, just to be sure, because he didn't know exactly what was going on at that point. So we took out the whole rear end to friends in Medellin.
And so you would use horseback to get the axle out.
Yeah,
Sure.
mule, donkey, horse, till we got to a river, till we could get it on a boat, to get to a bigger river, to a bigger boat, eventually to Turbo, where we got it on a bus, and then to Medellin.
Incredible. Incredible. So for the benefit of the listener, kind of help describe what was different from your crossing of the Darien Gap from, for example, what Mark Smith did, or from example, what John Blatchford Snell did. What would be the differences in those expeditions?
We would cross a river, but we'd never travel up or down a river to find a more convenient place to get in or out. Now, with Mark Smith, they came in from the south, which I don't have anything against that. It's a great idea. However, you're hitting the wettest part of the Darien Gap, the Atrado Swamp, at the very beginning of dry season. There's a lot of water still out there. There's a lot of swamp still out there. They ended up having to go up the Atrado River from Turbo to La Loma, the Cristales area, and go by land from that point. So they went, 60, 80 miles up the river till they got to La Loma. Punta America, La Loma are the names we know from locals. I don't know if those are what's on the map. And then went from there. Now, if they did another river travel, I don't know. That's the main one. Where if they go in the other direction, we did this. We timed it so that we hit the swamp at the very beginning of rainy season, the tail end of dry season, to the
When it
point
was as
where
dry
it
as
was
possible.
it was as dry as possible.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And we were able to find that dry land route through the swamps all the way to the Atrado River. And then right across the river was the town of Rio Sucio.
Right.
And Rio Sucio, we'd gone ahead of time and found out they had what they called a tractor trail, 38 miles long, that went out to a road. And so we considered Rio Sucio the end. We crossed the Atrado to Rio Sucio, and that 38 miles took us 10 hours to drive because it
But
was so
still,
rough.
you were able to do that
Right, it was
so
the
much
fastest
more.
we'd done in 2 years.
I can imagine. You found second gear.
Right, yeah, exactly. We also found a lot of dirt clogging the fuel filters because all of a sudden we got
Yeah.
some speed. And then Blackford Snell, they came in. Now, they had a lot further to go because of the Bayano area. But once they reached the Atrado, of course, then they went out by the Atrado River all the way down to Turbo.
Gotcha.
So that's where most of them do, is they go to Turbo and come up river, or get to the
Gotcha.
Atrado and then go down river.
Gotcha.
Where we went in a different direction, so that when we came out on the Atrado, we knew there was a road on the other side.
Amazing. And from my perspective, like, how did you even find fuel? I mean, because you were burning, you had to have been even though you're at
Right,
idle. And
exactly, yeah,
like,
when
fuel would have been probably one of the most difficult
It
things.
was, well, it's the heaviest, of course.
Sure.
And we had purchased a 55-gallon drum in Yavisa, and then filled up with gas there before we left, and then transported supplies, extra food, that 55-gallon drum, all the way upriver to Basal, and stored it there. And at that time, I think we paid $4 a gallon for gas, because gas down there was all premixed. You could
Sure.
get premixed for nothing practically, but not premix was a premium, because
Yeah,
again,
sure.
everything's boats.
Yep.
So we would stockpile up in Basal that first dry season, and we'd resupply either by sending people by boat to bring it back, or manpower hiking over and bringing back food or fuel. Then the second dry season, it was transported by manpower, because you're really off a river system, any major river system, going from Pukeru to Paya to the border, because now you're going all the way up to the top of the mountain, so there's no river system.
Sure.
So it's all packed by man up there, including fuel in 55-gallon 5-gallon containers. And then Lauren had gone ahead of time. The logistics of this trip are by far more difficult than winching. If you winch one hill, you can winch 20 hills.
Yeah, sure.
But getting everybody fed and fuel was the difficult part. He had gone ahead of time, gone into Colombia, and had arranged for mules to meet us at the border. And they would wait because that's one, let me just backtrack a little bit. No road through the Darien Gap. One of the reasons, in my opinion, is hoof and mouth is still very prevalent in South America and Colombia, the Choco province of Colombia. It's very prevalent. That Darien Gap is a natural barrier right now. Neither country allows hoofed animals to cross over, and sure enough, that's where they wait. The Colombians with their mules wait at the border for us. They won't come any further than that.
Right.
In fact, I don't even think Panama has any hoofed animals that close to the border. That's why we had to go with manpower.
Yeah, sure.
And then once we were on the mules, then we transported by mules till we could get to a river system. And so, moving the supplies
Incredible.
was more difficult than actually moving the Jeep at times.
Yeah, because at this point in time, 2025, it's only about 60 kilometers between the two roads now.
Okay.
And how long was your drive in
we
miles?
clocked it 125 miles
Yeah,
from
so
the
that's incredible.
Yavisa to Rio Sucio.
Yeah. So you're close to 300 miles or 300 kilometers.
Yeah.
So it's significantly shorter now because of all the infrastructure that's come in, particularly on the Colombian side. They've just gotten closer and closer and closer to the border.
Yeah, which is interesting because, it'll be see how the roads go. I don't think there'll be a road through in my lifetime.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, I mean, they've talked about it so many different
it's
times.
been
but-
talked about since I lived in Panama in the 70s.
Yeah,
so,
sure. Yeah, so you're right. Logistically, it's not something difficult to overcome,
Right.
but maybe it is the hoof and mouth,
Yeah,
and just politically.
Politically and the hoof and mouth, I think, are the barriers. Because Lauren was a construction man, road builder,
Yeah.
freeway overpasses, box culverts, that sort of thing. And he had talked to people in Colombia and the construction companies down there, and they say there's no reason it can't be built. I mean, they put a bridge to Key West. I mean,
Sure.
getting across the swamp is not going to be impossible.
Not a
It's
big
not like
deal.
you can't do it.
Yeah.
It's all the politics involved in it, and like I say, the hoof and mouth disease.
Well, and about the time that you guys were finishing this up in the 80s, there was already some real challenges around guerrilla
Right.
activity.
They were, yeah, it was beginning to be noticed. When we were on the Jeep expedition through the Gap, again, we tended to mind our own business and stay out of any controversy with anything. We weren't there to cause problems or to convert anybody or do anything like that. But our guides would point out that, especially in Colombia, not in Panama so much, that these big burlap sacks that were being stored outside this house was all marijuana that was
Sure.
being grown and transported further on. We never saw it. I don't know. I mean, we saw the burlap sacks.
Yeah.
I wouldn't know what's in the burlap sacks.
Sure.
That's what they're telling us.
Yeah. Most likely what it was.
Yeah. Now, to jump ahead, in 95, we went back on a two-wheel drive American-made Rokon motorcycle. We hadn't had enough. We had to do it again. And at that point, we did come face-to-face with the Colombian FARC guerrilla on two occasions. And we had known people, the missionaries that had lived in Pukeru, they were kidnapped and held for over 7 years and eventually killed. Henry, who was a resident of the town of Boca de Cupi. He was kind of like the biggest little Airbnb, not an Airbnb,
Yeah, sure.
but a bed and breakfast, if
Sure.
you want to call it a bed and breakfast at that time. He had that, his wife, and he ran a little restaurant, and you could sleep on a cot in the back room, that sort of thing. He was shot and killed. So we personally knew some people that were
Yeah.
kidnapped and shot and killed by the FARC guerrilla.
Yeah.
So we knew that that was always a possibility when we went down in 95. And yeah, we had two encounters, and to this day, we were blessed because we had absolutely no trouble with them whatsoever. They were polite, they were courteous, nothing, there was nothing. There was no problems whatsoever. And when we got to Rio Sucio, the Colombian police came right down to the river, and says, did you have trouble in the mountains? And actually, we had to tell them, no, we had
Yeah.
no trouble because we didn't. I
Yeah.
mean, because I know we knew what they were asking for, but we didn't have any problems.
Yeah.
A special thanks to Hankook Tires for supporting this week's podcast. Visit expeditionportal.com to see our content series in partnership with Hankook, where you'll learn about this year's Jeep Beach event in Daytona, Florida, get tips on exploring the Ocala National Forest, and take a tour of the Motorsports Hall of Fame of America at the Daytona International Speedway. We also take a close look at how to choose a mud terrain, all-terrain, or hybrid rugged terrain tire using the Hankook Dynapro tire lineup as examples.
That has changed a lot even in recent years.
Yes.
The last time that I was in Colombia, they had just voted to kind of, free all of the FARC, like make it where it's no longer an issue. Right. This was probably 2016 or so is when they had that big vote. So that was an interesting time to be in the country. There was a lot of kind of split feelings around it because so many people had died through those conflicts. But I think they're trying to move beyond it and move beyond it a little bit. Let's go back to the Jeep just a second because I think it's so fascinating that, at that period of time in the 70s, like most of the significant expeditions were being done by Jeeps. So like even the first Camel Trophy was done with Jeeps. You had Mark Smith doing big trips, you guys getting through the Darien Gap in a Jeep. And I think it's easy to now in 2025 think you want to do a big expedition with a Land Cruiser or whatever. What was Lauren's interest in the Jeep? Why did he decide that was the right tool for the job?
He was very patriotic. He wanted to do it in one American-made vehicle, not a series of them. That's why when the second one he lost in Ecuador, he didn't ship in a new vehicle and start from there. He had to do it in one vehicle, entirely around the world, American-made. Yeah. And that's why he stuck with Jeep. And in 83, when he was looking for the next vehicle, American Motors was owned mostly by Renault.
Yes, right, the French. Yeah,
and
sure.
he just doesn't seem like it's an all-American company. So it was just his personal preference, and
Sure.
that's why he bought the '66 Jeep instead
Gotcha.
of buying a new one.
I gotcha.
And
is that the Jeep that's here at the big thing right
Yes.
now? It's the original one.
It's the original.
That's
and
incredible.
Everything is still as was when he either put it on there or bought it, one of the two.
Patty, that is incredible. Like what a thing. What a thing. So it sounds like there was a lot of winching. So
was.
what winch did you have on the Jeep, and did it survive the entire Darien Gap? I want to hear about that, because that thing sounds like it did the most of the work.
That was one of the selling points on that vehicle, was that had already had this 9,000-pound Ramsey power takeoff winch.
Okay,
So it ran
PTO winch. got it.
PTO off the transmission, so you had 4 speeds.
Yep.
And because when you're winching, first of all, in places where if you have a dead battery, you are
Yes,
screwed.
Sure.
And you're winching for 6 hours a day.
Yeah.
PTO is the only way to go.
And it never failed. Never.
No, I think a shear pin
Okay.
went one time.
Yeah, safety.
And something. I don't remember. I don't know that much about the mechanical things, but I remember something about the shear pin or something.
Yeah, but that's designed to fail
Right,
under
exactly.
a load. Yeah.
And whatever it was fixed in the field.
Incredible.
We did have an issue. We also have a Scott 2-ton come along. And we did have an issue with the Jeep on what we called MA, as in the pronunciation of the letter M in Spanish. That's according to the natives. They said this is the MA River. Okay. On that, it's an extremely steep drop down to the river, too steep to drive. So Lauren had turned the Jeep around backwards, hooked up the winch cable, and put it in reverse. So you're just on spooling slowly going down this hill. Well, it wasn't but a couple of minutes into it, he realized he had no oil pressure. Either what we assume is the rear main seal went. It had to be that, because we could add oil to it when we were on the level, and it was fine. It was low on oil, so we added oil when we got oil down to the riverbed, and it was fine. But anyway, now we're stuck on this very steep hill. We can't run the engine. Without the engine, we can't run the winch.
The winch, sure.
So that come along came out, and we hand winched the 90 feet down to the riverbed in 6 hours.
Incredible.
And it was it was a total of 315 feet up and down, and then up the other side over 2.5 days. It was all hand winched.
Incredible. What?
So again, that's why it took 741 days, when you're going a quarter an inch every time the guys pulled on the handle of the come along.
So then when this gets done and you make it through the Darien Gap, and now you're in South America, did you decide at that point in time to join for the rest of the trip through South America?
Well, actually, the third dry season let me back up, in 1987, yes. My job was being phased out due to the Panama-U.S. treaties. They were going to an all-volunteer office staff with the Girl Scout office, which is what I ran. And I said, well, I need income, I need income. I can't volunteer. So I thought, well, the writing's on the wall. So I called Lauren in the States, because at this time we had the broken axles. I called him in the States. I said, I can join full time. This was this was 86, because we got out in 87. So this was like July, August 86. I said, I can join full time. He said, great. So I joined full time at that point. Well, I was in Panama until, I don't know, September or something, and then flew to the States. But
wow.
Then that's another whole thing, getting back to the Jeep with the parts. And things do not move quickly in third world countries.
Oh, especially
in the Darien Gap.
And in the 80s, like communication would have been so much more difficult. You and I talked about that a little bit yesterday. I mean, in some ways, the trip was a little bit easier, because it would have been a little bit safer in general, a little bit less banditry, a little bit more stable politically overall, but certainly much more difficult when it comes to communication. There was no sat phones. There was no Starlink. There was no GPS.
No GPS. Yeah, nothing. I mean, we wouldn't get mail for months at a time. And once, when we could get mail, I would try to phone home and tell Mom we're still alive, that type of thing. Because she was our base in the States where mail was held, and she would hold it until we told her where to send it.
I mean, what you guys did is, it was kind of at the very end of what would have been the blank spots on the map. When communication wasn't possible, at least not quickly.
Right.
There was so much unknown. about how to do those things, or even like where to go. I mean, now if I plan a trip, I bring up Google Earth and I can
Right.
look at satellite imagery and I can
Exactly.
see the
Yeah.
condition of the road. I mean, I can plan to the nth degree before I even turn the
Yeah.
key on the car.
Oh, exactly.
Or push the button on the car now.
Yeah,
But,
exactly. Exactly. Well, we've always said you needed three things to go through the Darien Gap. You need patience, you need determination, and you need money.
Mm-hmm.
If you've got a lot of the first two, you don't need too much of that third one.
Mm-hmm.
That's where we were. We had a lot of the patience and determination. We didn't have that much money.
Sure.
But if you don't have those first two, you better have boatloads of that third one, because then you just pay your way through.
That's right.
And that was something we didn't. I mean, we would get to places, and well, if we wanted to pay extra, we could get a faster boat. Or if we wanted to pay extra, we get a boat today. Well,
Yeah.
no, we got the time. We'll wait. We'll pay the cheaper price, and boat will come in a day or two.
Well, and I remember reading about one of the situations that came up with the Rokon. You guys had come into like a semi-autonomous region,
Oh.
and the bike had been basically confiscated by the village, and it lists $500 in there, and my first inclination was like, oh, that's not that much money, but this was 1990.
95,
Yeah,
yeah.
so I mean that was a lot of money in '95.
It was, and that's what
the
we
principle
were.
of it, too.
Principle on it.
Yeah.
We had. This was the same village Lauren had lived outside of
Yeah.
with the Jeep for 9
Yeah.
months. So he knew these people. He knew how they worked. We know their customs. They knew we were coming. I had walked to the village ahead of time, so they knew we were en route.
Yeah.
And then before we even entered the village, we had two people with us from the village that were working for us that walked in with Lauren to ask permission to enter the village.
Yeah.
And it was granted, and we were shown a camping place. So there were a lot of opportunities for them to tell us of this new law
Yeah.
that motorcycles had to pay $500. But
Right.
they waited till we were in the village, and then they said $500. It doesn't matter if you go back the way you came or you're going forward.
Yeah. Yeah. So then you feel taken advantage
Right.
of. But you overcame that. I mean, you
We
even brought the police in, and then finally the negotiation. They probably were starting to come to.
Oh, yeah,
their
they
rip.
actually, eventually, they actually sent a letter and said that they would dismiss any charges. Because what we were doing, it was actually, they met in the middle after the expedition. And these people knew us, they trusted us. We
Yeah.
did not pay them off until we got back to Panama. They
Yeah.
knew they wouldn't get paid till Lauren returned down there
Yep.
to pay them off.
Yeah.
Lauren was on his way down there with a letter written in Spanish that we felt that this law was just created for us, and therefore it was not legal, and that
It
if
was
they
punitive purely.
right,
Yeah.
if they wanted to take us to a court of law in Panama City, we would gladly go to a court of law.
Yeah.
And Cookie, our cook on the trip, was headed to Panama with a note for Lauren stating that they had dismissed all charges this time, but to let other people know that there was now a $500 fee for motorcycles going.
I guess.
There was 1,000 for a vehicle, 500 for a motorcycle, 100 for a photographer. They
Yeah.
had all these. They had it by that time they had the kinks worked out of it. So they passed, and so it worked out that we didn't pay. They never got our note. We got their note.
Gotcha.
Lauren gave the money to Cookie. Cookie went out and paid off the men.
Got it.
So everyone was happy in the
Was
end.
made whole
Yeah.
in the end. And was the Rokon trip also successful?
Yes, it was. But I have not set foot in the village of Pukeru since then. I've been back down there in 77 and 79. And I won't go back to the village. I just don't trust the people.
Yeah, that's too bad.
There's two people in a village I dearly love, and
Yeah.
I've sent a guide from another village in and said I would like to meet with them.
Yeah.
If they want to come, have
Yeah.
them come to me, and they've come and spent time with me. But
Yeah.
I won't go to Pukeru. It was just a very, very traumatic experience to have that happen.
Yeah, when you develop those deep relationships and trust with another culture, and then to have money corrupt that.
Right, exactly.
Which money tends to do, doesn't it?
It does.
Yeah.
It does.
So tell me the high points of South America. What was the high points on that?
And as a special thanks to you listeners, the Overland Journal podcast is made possible because of listeners like yourself and because of the subscribers to the Overland Journal magazine. So if you go on to overlandjournal.com and you subscribe to the print magazine, you can use the code Overland Podcast at checkout for 20% off. Thanks again for your support.
I think because we were on such a tight budget, there weren't many. I loved the country, but we knew we were on a very, very tight budget at that point because we were looking at about a $600 or $6,000, excuse me, fee. Was it $6,000 that we had?
Oh, to ship back?
To ship to Africa. Because we're going to be without the home for 30 days,
Yeah.
shipping, and then our airfare. So yeah, it was more than six. It was probably $6,000 or something. And we knew we at that point we thought we'd get to Africa and have to store the vehicle and both go back to work. But that was the goal, was to at least get to Africa. And we had made a contact in Lima with a newspaper there, that an English-speaking newspaper, and a gentleman had written an article in it for us. So we were kind of using that as a calling card. And I started going to shipping agents in Lima, and then later in Santiago, Chile, when we got down there. And I just got to this one, it was Ian Taylor Shipping Agency, and it was a British company at that time. And they said, well, leave us your information and contact us in about 2 weeks. We have to send this to the head office. And so I said, okay, fine. Well, we then went on down to Punta Arenas, Chile, to the end of the road there. And when we were done, I called back to Ian Taylor, and they said, yes, we've got free passage for you and Lauren and the Jeep across the Atlantic on a freighter.
Incredible.
So that was like, wow, that was the
It
biggest.
saved you the flights and
Oh,
everything.
the hassle, yeah, and like I said, it's home. When you don't have home, you're paying a lot more for your meals and lodging and all that.
So did you have a small room on the ship, or did you sleep in the Jeep still?
No, they gave us the infirmary.
Oh,
They gave
okay.
us the infirmary.
Oh, wow.
On the ship. It was a Greek freighter. She was loaded right on the front cargo hatch along with all the containers. And
How cool.
Just latched down, tied down tight. And that's where she sat for 30 days across the Atlantic.
What an experience. So now you're crossing oceans.
Yeah.
I love that.
I learned I'm not a sailor.
Fair enough. Yeah, it can be challenging for sure. So then you guys shipped to South Africa? Is that where you shipped to?
Yeah, we came in at Cape Town.
And what year was that?
That would have been 87. We got there in August or September, 1st of September.
That would have been
87.
an incredible time to be in Southern Africa.
It was. It was good. South Africa has a lot to offer.
Beautiful place.
It's a small country compared to the United States, but it has the diversity that you find in this country. You've got deserts, you've got mountains, you've got coastal, you've got wine country, you have a little bit of everything. You've got skiing in the Drakensberg.
Yep.
You have a little bit of everything in a small area.
Yeah, beautiful country,
And
truly.
we spent about 6 months in South Africa and over in Namibia, just traveling around, since we had that little bit of extra cushion
Yeah, sure.
because we're camping and that's it.
And
I mean,
food's pretty cheap there.
Well, not only that,
and
but
plentiful.
no matter where you are, you can't count food in your budget because you have to eat anyway.
Yeah,
So
sure.
it's not really a
Yeah.
priority. I mean,
Yeah.
it's there no matter what. But and we made some great friends that we're still in contact with that now live in this country.
Amazing.
From South Africa.
Yeah, one of my favorite places in the world. So then you guys drove up the east coast of Africa, and you had some challenges in Sudan.
Yeah, we went through basically the heart of Africa. When we left South Africa, because it was under the apartheid government still, we could only go through Botswana and Zambia because they had relations with South Africa. In Zambia, we got new passports, and we also went to the Kenyan embassy, and we were told that, and we were told this before, that there was just no way we were going to get through Tanzania and Kenya because of being in South Africa. And they said,
Because you had been stamped in, even though you were American citizens.
right, and we had a carnet as well, and that was all
Got it.
recorded. And they said that if you show up at a border, either in Kenya or Tanzania, with a passport newer than 6 months, because they knew people were getting new passports,
Right.
they had to see the old passport.
Right.
And we said, okay, fine. So right through the center of the country, which is now changed back to, I think, the Congo or Republic of the Congo or something. It's very difficult for me to keep up who's what. Very, very difficult country. Very difficult because it was so poor.
Yeah.
And roads were absolutely horrendous.
You were back in the Darien Gap again.
Just about. I mean, it was 4,000 miles of four-wheeling through Africa in 6 months.
And did you connect back up into Ethiopia? And that's
No, we went through, I'm looking at your map, we went through the center of Zaire. We had to swing over in Rwanda for a day because there was a road, we were told by some overlanders that were coming south that there was a section of road that was really, really, we had problems with springs at the time. They said, don't go between these two towns, go over into Rwanda, the roads are much better, and then you come out at Goma,
Okay.
and then you're back on a little bit better road. So we ended up doing that. And then over to Kisangani, and then crossed into the Central African Republic. Because we had to go to Bangui, that's the capital, right?
Okay.
Yes. Because we had to go to the Sudanese embassy to get a visa for Sudan.
Right.
And everyone we had talked to, because most of these overlanders at this time are all Europeans coming through. And they said, it takes 6 months to get a visa to get into the Sudan. And we're thinking, oh, this isn't going to be good. And we went into the Sudanese embassy in Sudan, and literally we walked in, guy at the desk, told him what we wanted. He said, leave your passports, come back this afternoon. 3-4 hours later, we
You
had
were
visas
done.
going into Sudan. So it was our
Wonderful.
time to do this.
Yeah, for sure.
It was then going east through Central African Republic into Sudan. We came in at Nyala, and then it was east, pretty much east and slightly north, going to Khartoum. Well, we actually, up to Khartoum that way. And the last maybe 2 days of the trip, or 3 days to Khartoum, I had gotten very, very sick and was basically out. I mean, the only reason I know what happened is because I can read Lauren's journal, and he
Yeah.
writes in his journal. We could sleep in our Jeep. Difficult, but we could do it.
Yeah.
And he made up the bed so that I could sleep while he drove, because this was June,
So hot.
and it was quite warm.
Yeah.
And we got to Khartoum and got to a clinic, and I was diagnosed with malaria and amoebic dysentery.
That's a combo.
Yeah. And was kept there for 3 days while they gave me the massive
Yep.
overdose of the malaria pills. And
Yeah, those are big pills.
Oh.
I'm glad I've never had to take one yet, but I always have them with me, but
Yeah.
they're giant.
yeah, well, we had been taking pills since we left South Africa,
Got it.
but it was taking us longer to get through Africa than we had anticipated, so we ran out in
Sure.
the Central African Republic.
Oh, no.
And
Yeah, right there.
yeah, so yeah, who's to say? And we were also told that so many of the pills nowadays, the mosquitoes are becoming
They do.
resistant to. So
They do,
it's a flip a coin whether you're going to get it or not.
Yeah.
So I was hospitalized there in Khartoum for several days before I got out, and then it was a couple of weeks getting stuff organized and me still recuperating.
And then
before we
did you
headed
get your
north.
visa for Egypt at that point in time?
Right, we got the paperwork. We made a contact with a gentleman who was a Sudanese businessman, and his wife worked for the Egyptian embassy.
Good timing.
And it was. She was fantastic, because she gave us a letter of introduction, and that saved our little bacon, because when we crossed into Egypt, we didn't even know we were in Egypt. We're driving through the desert, and there's a black strip running east to west way up in front of us. There's no other geographical markers of any kind. And I'm looking at the map, and Lauren says, is it railroad tracks? And I'm saying, no, there's no railroad tracks. Is it a pipeline? No, it's not a pipeline. And we're getting closer and closer to this black strip. It was an asphalt road,
Wow.
but it was built up a little bit.
Sure.
And it was just poured on top of the sand, but it was running east to west. And we thought, well, that's weird, because we assumed that if we hit a road, it would be going north to south. We said, well, the Nile's to the east, obviously that's the way we want to go. So we turned that way and ended up at a military outpost, and they had no clue what to do with us,
Yeah,
because
sure.
they hadn't had anything like this happen.
Right.
We said, well, we got this letter, and they said, okay, fine, but you're going to be under house arrest till we get you to Aswan, where you
Right.
can check in, because
Right.
that's where the
Sure.
legitimate stuff happens.
Amazing.
So we had an armed guard accompanying us all the way to Aswan.
And then you continued all the way up to Alexandria.
No, we
I'm
didn't go
assuming-
that far. Cairo, and then from Cairo, it was back to the east, because there's a tunnel under the Suez Canal.
Right.
Because again, have to remain on land. Drove under the Suez Canal through the Sinai, and at that time into Egypt. And at that time, this was 88, Egypt and Jordan were technically at war. There was no fighting or anything like that, but because of the problems between Israel and the rest of the Arab world, Jordan had said, and they had told us at an embassy, that they're just, in order to get along with the rest of the Arabs, they have to be
Right.
at war with Israel. So we tried for about a week to drive into Jordan, because the only other option was Libya, and that was, not Libya, Lebanon, and that was definitely out. because this was, 5 years after the Marine Corps barracks bombing in Lebanon.
Sure.
We're driving a big red Jeep with California license plates. There's no question as to where she's from. And so we thought that's definitely not going to work. So we ended up working with, we ended up with the United Nations there. And we said, look, paint it white, big blue UN on it. You drive it across the Allenby Bridge or King Hussein Bridge. I mean, it's only about 20, 30 meters wide. It's nothing. It's a creek at that point. We'll fly. It's the vehicle that has to do the trip.
Right.
We will get there another way.
Right.
He said, we can't even drive our vehicles. We drive up to the bridge, we walk across, and we're picked up on the other side.
Wow.
So we ended up going back into Egypt and taking a ferry to Jordan. So that was a water break.
No, you didn't have another option.
But we had no other option.
Yeah.
Fast forward 2018, May 3rd, we drove from a road we were on in Israel to the road we were on in Jordan, made a U-turn, and came back in Israel in that Jeep. She was shipped to Israel.
Incredible.
And
so you finished the last piece.
We always called it the final mile, and she was finally done May 3rd, 2018.
Oh, Patty, that's incredible. Yeah. Wow. What else did you get to do on that trip, on your most recent trip? Did you get to go anywhere else fun?
Well, I got to spend more time in Israel, which was fun. I enjoyed that. Yeah.
Like the history in that
place.
place.
I want to go back. That's between Israel and Jordan, the history that's there and the scenery, and especially if you're deserts. And Lauren introduced me to deserts, and I realized after living in the tropics for years that camping in the deserts is so much nicer when it rains than the tropics.
Sure.
So yeah, the scenery that's there, the history that's there, it's just absolutely mind-boggling. And we made some really good friends in Israel over there. Yeah. And I hope that one day when I'm kind of done with all of this, that I'll be able to go back and spend, a couple of months and just do public transportation, rent a car, and just
explore.
Just take my time in the country.
So I want to pivot my question a little bit to if you were to give some advice to your 18-year-old self, which was already living in Panama in the Canal zone, already being the adventurer that you were. But if you were to give advice to your younger self or to another 18-year-old that was getting ready to start a life of adventure, what would be a couple pieces of advice that you would give?
Do it. Just do it. Have patience and have respect. I mean, with those two things, you can usually cross any border.
A little bit of a good attitude, a smile.
Yeah. Be respectful. You don't have to, and be patient. Don't go there expecting things to just go right away, just like they would do here most of the time. Although some things are just kind of going that way too. Just have that patience to go in and we'll get through this when we get through this. You know? I got to wait. Sure, let me wait. I've got a book here. I'll read for a while. We can camp in the vehicle. We'll be back here tomorrow morning, So, you have to have that patience and respect when you're going into other countries.
But otherwise, just go.
But just go. Yeah. If it's something you want to do in your heart, start thinking about it. And then once you start thinking about it, just make it happen. And we always said, have a dream. Work towards that dream. Just everything you do, and that's what we did. Everything we had, we pooled because this is what we wanted to do.
Yeah, even last night it was great hearing Clay and Rochelle talk about, people finding their own big thing. Yeah. And I agree with that whole idea. Like, why not start with something really big? Yeah. That way, if you make it halfway, you've still done something that you would have never expected that you could have done in your life. Yeah. But I think what I have found is that the big things take just about as much work as the average things.
Oh, yeah.
And that's because most people do average things. So you have a lot more competition in the average side of things.
Yeah, I was talking to a lady last night there, and she's just new to this. This is her first, she's just recently divorced, and she's just looking for something. And she wants to, I said, well, go to Canada and Alaska. You don't really need a passport. You need your star card or whatever it is anymore. That's all you need. Just do that, just to get a little bit outside your comfort zone. Once you do that, come back. Go to Baja.
Yeah.
Baja's beautiful. You can spend months down there, years down there.
For sure.
And then maybe one day you'll say, this was pretty good. Let's go further.
Yeah, I love that. Patty, one of the things that I wanted to talk to you about, because I know it could help a lot of the people that are listening, but you had a profound loss in losing Lauren several years ago. What were some of the things that you found helped you through that? What were some of the things that you did in your life that helped you with that kind of loss?
The determination again. Yeah, that determination to get out there and just keep plugging at getting the story told. Lauren had a quote. It's on the side of my trailer. It was on the side of a 79 Jeep. And it's written inside the Jeep that Connie and I are going to run, compete the Rebelle in.
I love that.
But it's what I dare, I will. What I will, I do. And I'm just going with that.
Day by day. And now you're going to go race in the Rebelle. So tell me a little bit about that. I love this idea. I mean, the Rebelle Rally is just incredible.
It's phenomenal. It really is. And I had been following it off and on for the past, 3 or 4 years. I'd go online and watch it because you can actually watch the little dots on the map during the rally itself. But the Rebelle Rally is the longest off-road rally in the United States, about 2,500 kilometers. It has 65 teams, all women, and all your navigation in your vehicle has been disabled if it has. Some vehicles, they have some that are, don't have the navigation aids. But I mean, you have to learn to navigate using maps, compasses, plotters, scales, finding, plotting your GPS locations, and those are checkpoints.
And your trip meter and everything else?
Yes, yeah, we've got an external odometer so that I can see an odometer and Connie can see her odometer, and stopwatches, and you got more gadgets that you have to use, but they're all old school compared to, your navigation thing on the dashboard.
What's the name of your team?
Tried and True, TNT.
I love that.
Yeah, I've always said we're tried by adventure and true to the finish.
And what vehicle are you going to drive?
We're driving a 2023 JL Rubicon?
Wrangler, nice.
Wrangler, yeah, right.
Awesome.
Wrangler. And that's being provided to us by AEV.
Oh, fantastic.
And they know Lauren's story, my story, and they've made the vehicle look as close to our 66 CJ5 as they can.
Oh, how awesome is that? Well, we can't wait to follow you in the Rebelle. Your adventures in Jeeps continue.
Yes.
So after the Rebelle, what do you think would be next for you? What's your next big thing after that?
The big thing, going on Clay's talk last night, the book. We have to get a book out. Misty. Misty has been working with me for about a year, although not continually because we're both doing other things. And of course, she had to move to Florida that kind of kinked things up a little bit, but we were Google meeting quite often during the winter. Now that we're both traveling again, it's a little more difficult, but she's working on the book.
Incredible.
And she's a great writer. She went to school for journalism. That's what her degree's in. So
I think she's the one that wrote the article for us about your living legend piece. Yeah.
So I have, a whole bunch of faith in her, and she's gotten I've sent her, because the journals are all done. That's one thing I spent time on over years, is typing up our field journals. And the way they're typed up is you'll read one day and you'll read Lauren's journal. His nephew was with us for a while. You'll read his journal. You'll read my journal. So you'll read one day's worth of journals from 3 different points of view.
Fantastic.
So you'll get 3 different views of what all went on in that one day. And sometimes, I'll be reading the journal and think, I don't know what Lauren's talking about. So I have to read my journal to figure out what he's talking about. Or I don't know what I'm talking about. I have to read his journal to figure out what I'm talking about.
Sure. So how can people find out more information about Lauren and your incredible journeys? Do you have a website?
I do.
And then are you on any social media channels?
Well, sort of.
That's okay. No judgment there.
No, I have an Instagram. It's just that I'm not too at keeping it updated.
That's okay.
But the Instagram is at Sandship Discovery.
Okay.
That's the name of the Jeep. And then, but my website is outbackofbeyond.com.
I love that. And then we'll have the book to look forward to.
Yeah, hopefully within a year. We're planning on it.
Is there any other way that our organization can support you, or the listeners can help you with your upcoming adventures?
If they want to go to our TNTtriedandtrue.com website, there's ways they can help us there.
Awesome. So there's ways they can donate towards your trip? They can donate,
yeah, because we still have to raise money for gas, the rental of the tracking equipment that they're going to put on us so that they'll know where we are.
Sure.
We won't, but they'll be able to figure it out. And then there's some other incidental expenses that are going to be coming up. But yeah, there's that. There's a Amazon gift registry there.
Awesome.
So every little bit helps, and we're just going to make it work.
Well, we are so grateful that you took the time to spend with us today on the podcast.
Oh, I appreciate it. Thank
So
you so much.
you are an absolute legend and an inspiration to so many, and so is your husband, Lauren. What you guys did, I remember reading about it years ago, and just absolutely in awe of what you guys accomplished together, and you're continuing to inspire people to get out and explore the world. So thank you for that.
I hope so. But the United States is really a very tiny country. It's very small.
There's a big world out there.
There's a very big world out there.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Patty,
you,
for
Scott.
being on the podcast, and we thank you all for listening. And we'll talk to you next time.